Getting into a taxi or rideshare is something millions of us do every day without a second thought. It's convenient, it's easy, and it's almost always perfectly safe. But what happens when that trust is broken? What happens when the person behind the wheel isn't who they seem? Tonight, we're delving into the shadows of the everyday commute, exploring chilling true stories from people who got into a car with a stranger and lived to tell the tale, but were forever changed by the experience. These aren't just spooky campfire stories. They are real accounts from people who found themselves in a terrifying nightmare. So buckle up, because this is going to be a bumpy ride. Our first story comes from a woman named Closey, who was heading home after a late night working at a restaurant. She ordered a rideshare, and a car matching the description pulled up. The driver seemed friendly enough at first, making small talk about her night. But as they drove, she noticed they were taking a strange route, turning down dark, unfamiliar side streets. When she questioned him, he just smiled and said he knew a shortcut. Her unease grew into full-blown panic when he completely missed the turn for her street and kept driving into a more industrial, deserted area. She demanded he stop the car, but he just laughed, a chilling, empty sound. He told her she was pretty and that they were just going for a little drive. Her heart was pounding. She knew she had to get out. Thinking fast, she told him she felt sick and was going to be sick all over his car. This seemed to snap him out of his strange trance. Annoyed, he pulled over. The second the car stopped, Chloe didn't hesitate. She threw the door open and ran, not daring to look back. She ran until she saw the lights of a main road and flagged down another car. She never reported the incident, too shaken and unsure if anyone would believe her. She deleted the app, and to this day, she gets a cold feeling of dread every time she sees a rideshare car. It is a terrifying reminder of how a normal ride home can turn into a desperate fight for survival. Next, we have a story from Mark, a college student who is visiting friends in a different city. After a night out, he and his friend decided to grab a taxi back to their hotel. The first cab that pulled over looked a little old and beat up, but they were tired and just wanted to get back. The driver was a silent, imposing figure who didn't say a word, just nodded when they gave him the address. The ride started normally, but then Mark noticed the meter wasn't on. When he pointed it out, the driver grunted and mumbled something about it being a flat rate. A few minutes later, the driver pulled over abruptly on a quiet street, and another man jumped into the front passenger seat. This was when real fear set in. The new guy turned around and, in a very calm voice, told Mark and his friend to give them all their money and phones. The driver just sat there, staring straight ahead. They were trapped. They handed over their wallets and phones, praying that would be the end of it. The man in the passenger seat checked their wallets. That's it. He and the driver started arguing in a language Mark didn't understand. It was the longest few minutes of his life. Suddenly, the driver slammed on the gas and sped off, eventually screeching to a halt a few blocks away. The other man yelled at them to get out. They scrambled out of the cab and it sped off into the night, leaving them stranded, penniless, and terrified. They eventually found their way back to the hotel, but the memory of that silent, menacing driver and his accomplice still haunts Mark. It was a stark lesson that danger can appear when you least expect it. This next account is particularly disturbing and comes from a Reddit user who shared her experience to warn others. Let's call her Sarah. She was leaving a concert and her phone had died, so she couldn't use her app. She saw a car with a rideshare sticker in the window and, in a moment of desperation, flagged it down. The driver, a man who seemed to be in his late 40s, agreed to take her for cash. At first, the conversation was normal. He asked about the concert, her job, the usual stuff. But then the questions started getting personal, uncomfortably so. He asked if she had a boyfriend, if she lived alone. Sarah gave vague, non-committal answers, trying to steer the conversation back to neutral topics. That's when she noticed the child lock was engaged on her door. She couldn't open it from the inside. He told her he needed to make a quick stop at his house. Her mind was racing. She knew this was incredibly bad. She started to cry, begging him to just take her home, offering him all the cash she had. He ignored her, a creepy smile playing on his lips. As he slowed down to turn into a dark driveway, Sarah made a split-second decision. She launched herself over the front seat, grabbing the steering wheel and yanking it hard. The car swerved violently, hitting a mailbox and jolting to a stop. The driver, caught by surprise, was dazed for a second. That was all the time she needed. She unlocked the driver's side door, scrambled out, and ran for her life, screaming at the top of her lungs. Lights started coming on in the nearby houses. She didn't stop running until she reached a busy, well-lit intersection. The police were called, and they later found the car abandoned. The driver was never caught. Sarah was lucky to escape, and her story is a chilling warning about the dangers of getting into an unofficial rideshare, no matter how tired or desperate you are. Our final story tonight is a different kind of horror, one that's more psychological but no less terrifying. It comes from a man named James who was traveling for business. He landed late at night and took the taxi from the official airport queue. The driver was an older man, very talkative and friendly. He pointed out landmarks and told James stories about the city. It all felt very normal. As they got closer to the hotel, the driver started talking about his family. He spoke about his daughter, who he said was about James's age. But then the tone shifted. He started talking about how his daughter had passed away a few years ago in a car accident. He became very emotional, his voice cracking. James offered his condolences, feeling a deep sense of sympathy for the man. But the driver kept going, the details becoming more and more graphic. He described the accident in minute, gruesome detail. He described his daughter's injuries, the sound she made, the look in her eyes. The car filled with a heavy, oppressive atmosphere. James was frozen in his seat, unable to speak, forced to listen to this man's raw, unfiltered grief. The driver then turned to him, his eyes filled with tears, and said, "You have her eyes." The rest of the ride was in complete, heavy silence. When they finally reached the hotel, James practically threw the money at the driver and fled the car, his heart hammering in his chest. He couldn't shake the feeling of being a captive audience to this man's trauma. Was the story true? Or was it a twisted, manipulative performance? James will never know. But the image of that grieving father and the weight of his story stayed with him long after he left that cab, a psychological scar from a ride he'll never forget. These stories serve as a powerful reminder that while technology and services like taxis and rideshares have made our lives easier, they also require us to place our trust and our safety in the hands of strangers. The vast majority of these drivers are hardworking, honest people, but as we've heard tonight, there are exceptions, and when things go wrong, they can go terrifyingly wrong. Always trust your gut. If a situation feels off, it probably is. Verify your ride, share your trip details with a friend, and never hesitate to end the ride and get out if you feel unsafe. Your safety is more important than being polite. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Stay aware, stay safe, and be sure to subscribe for more true stories from the darker side of life. We'll see you next time. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. We've all been there, right? It's late, you're tired, and you just want to get home. You pull out your phone, tap a few buttons, and within minutes, a car arrives to whisk you away. Ride-sharing apps and taxis have become such a normal part of our lives, a convenience we rarely think twice about. But tonight, we're going to peel back that layer of convenience and look at what can happen when the person behind the wheel is and who you think they are. These are a few terrifying and true taxi and rideshare horror stories. So buckle up because this is going to be a bumpy ride. Our first story comes from a woman named Chloe. She was heading home after a late shift at a restaurant. It was past midnight, the city streets were quiet, and she was exhausted. She called a rideshare, and a few minutes later, a generic-looking sedan pulled up. The driver seemed friendly enough, a bit quiet, but nothing out of the ordinary. Chloe confirmed her destination and settled in for the 20-minute drive. As they drove, she noticed the driver kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror. It wasn't just a quick check. His eyes would linger. It made her skin crawl, but she tried to dismiss it as her being overly tired. Then he missed a turn. Not just any turn, but a major one that led directly to her neighborhood. "Hey," Chloe said, "you were supposed to turn back there." The driver just smiled into the mirror. "Don't worry," he said, his voice smooth. "I know a shortcut." That's when Pune alarm bells started blaring in Chloe's head. The shortcut took them down a series of dark, unfamiliar, and increasingly deserted streets. The city lights faded behind them, replaced by the shadows of warehouses and empty lots. Her heart was pounding. She looked at her phone. The little blue dot on the map was moving further and further away from her destination. She decided to act. Pretending to be on a call with her boyfriend, she loudly said, "Yeah, honey, I'm almost there. The driver is taking a weird route, but I'm sharing my location with you so you can see exactly where I am. You can meet me outside." She made sure the driver heard every word. His smile vanished, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. For a few tense moments, he said nothing. The car continued down the dark road. Then abruptly, he slammed on the brakes, did a U-turn, and sped back towards the main road. He didn't say a word for the rest of the trip. When he finally pulled up to her apartment, he practically kicked her out of the car before peeling away. Chloe never reported it. She was just too scared. But she never forgot the feeling of being completely at the mercy of a stranger with bad intentions. This next story is a chilling reminder to always check the car and a license plate. A college student named Mike was leaving a friend's party. It was a chaotic scene with people spilling out onto the street. He called a ride, and a car that matched the description pulled up. The driver rolled down the window and called his name. Mike, not thinking twice, hopped in the back. The driver was a man in his late 40s, and he was a little too friendly, asking a lot of personal questions. Where did Mike live? Did he live alone? What was he studying? Mike, trying to be polite, gave vague answers. After a few minutes, his phone buzzed. It was a notification from his rideshare app. "Your driver is arriving now." Mike's blood ran cold. He looked at his phone, then at the man driving. This wasn't his ride. He was in a stranger's car. He immediately told the driver, "Hey, I'm so sorry. I think I got in the wrong car. Can you please pull over and let me out?" The driver's friendly demeanor evaporated. He locked the doors. "No, I don't think so," he said, his voice low and menacing. "We're going to have some fun." Mike panicked. He started yelling, banging on the window. They were approaching a red light at a busy intersection. It was his only chance. As the car slowed, Mike didn't hesitate. He threw his shoulder against the door, rattling it. The driver cursed and tried to speed up, but it was too late. The light was red. Mike started screaming for help, pounding on the glass. People in the cars around them started to notice, their heads turning. One person even honked their horn. The driver, realizing he was drawing too much attention, swore loudly, unlocked the doors, and yelled, "Get out." Mike scrambled out of the car and ran, not stopping until he was blocks away, his heart hammering against his ribs. He called the police, but the car was long gone. It was a terrifyingly close call that could have ended so much worse. Our final story is perhaps the most unsettling. It comes from a man named James, who was a frequent business traveler. One evening, He landed in a new city and grabbed a taxi from the official airport queue. The driver was an older man, quiet and professional. The ride started normally. They chatted idly about the weather and the city. But about halfway through the trip, the driver started to slow down, his head lolling to the side. James thought he was just tired. "Are you okay, sir?" he asked. The driver didn't respond. He just kept slowing down, drifting across the lane. Then the driver's body went rigid. He started making a gurgling sound, his eyes rolling back in his head. He was having a seizure. The car was still moving, slowly drifting towards the concrete median of the highway. Cars were honking, swerving around them. James was in the back seat, separated by a thick plastic partition. The doors were locked. He was trapped in a moving vehicle with an unconscious driver. Thinking fast, he started kicking at the partition, screaming for the driver to wake up. It was no use. The car bumped against the median, scraping along the concrete with a horrifying shriek of metal. James saw the lock mechanism on his door. He frantically started trying to jimmy it with his pen, his fingers shaking. Nothing. The car was still moving, guided only by the concrete wall. He was a passenger on a ghost ride. In a final, desperate act, he braced himself and slammed his entire body weight against the door. He felt something give. He did it again, and the lock popped open. The car was still scraping along the wall at about 15 miles per hour. James took a deep breath, opened the door, and threw himself out of the moving vehicle, rolling onto the shoulder of the highway. He was bruised and scraped, but alive. Other drivers had stopped and were already calling for an ambulance for the taxi driver. James never found out what happened to him, but the memory of being trapped, helpless, in that moving coffin has haunted him ever since. These stories aren't meant to make you paranoid, but to make you aware. The vast majority of drivers are hardworking, honest people just trying to make a living. But it only takes one wrong ride to change your life forever. Always double-check the license plate and the driver's photo. Share your trip status with a friend or family member. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't be afraid to end the ride, to get out of the car, or to make a scene if you have to. Your safety is more important than being polite. Thanks for watching. I hope these stories serve as a valuable reminder to always stay vigilant. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video. We've all done it, right? You're out late, maybe you've had a drink or two, and you just want to get home safe. So you pull out your phone, tap a few buttons, and within minutes, a car pulls up to whisk you away. We trust these services, these strangers, to get us from point A to point B. But what happens when that trust is broken? What happens when the person behind the wheel isn't who they seem? Tonight, we're diving into some of the most chilling, terrifying, and absolutely true horror stories from the world of taxis and rideshares. These stories will make you think twice the next time you step into a stranger's car. Buckle up, because this is going to be a bumpy ride. Our first story comes from a user named Clara, a college student who was just trying to get back to her dorm after a late-night study session at the library. It was around 2 a.m., the campus was deserted, and she was exhausted. She called a rideshare, and a car arrived pretty quickly. The driver was a man who seemed friendly enough at first, making small talk about her major and her classes. But as they drove, Clara noticed they weren't taking the usual route back to her dorm. When she pointed it out, the driver just smiled and said, "I know a shortcut." His tone was a little off, but she tried to dismiss it as her being overly tired and paranoid. Then he started asking strange questions. "Do you live alone in your dorm? Do your parents know you're out this late? Do you have a boyfriend?" The questions became more and more personal, and a cold dread started to creep up her spine. She politely tried to steer the conversation back to something neutral, but he was persistent. He turned down a dark, unfamiliar street, far from the well-lit campus roads. At this point, full-blown panic set in. Clara looked at her phone and saw the little car icon on the app's map moving further and further away from her destination. Her heart was pounding. She knew she had to get out. Thinking fast, she pretended to get a frantic call from her roommate. She spoke loudly, saying things like, "What? The fire alarm is going off. Is everyone evacuating? I'm almost there." She hoped the driver would overhear and get spooked. It worked. His friendly demeanor vanished. He slammed on the brakes in the middle of the dark street and unlocked the doors. "Get out," he hissed. Clara didn't need to be told twice. She scrambled out of the car and ran without looking back. She ran until she saw the lights of a 24-hour convenience store and burst inside, shaking and crying. She immediately reported the driver to the app and the police. They later found out he had a history of similar complaints. Clara never took a late-night rideshare alone again. Her story is a terrifying reminder that a friendly face can sometimes hide the darkest intentions. Next, we have a story from a guy named Mark, who is traveling for work in a city he'd never visited before. After a long day of meetings, he decided to take a taxi from his hotel to a recommended restaurant downtown. He hailed a cab on the street, an older, slightly beat-up sedan. The driver was a quiet, older man who didn't say much, which Mark actually preferred after a day of nonstop talking. The ride started normally, winding through the city streets. Mark was looking out the window, taking in the new sights. But after about 15 minutes, he realized the meter wasn't running. When Mark pointed this out, the driver just grunted and said, "Don't worry, flat rate. Good price for you." Mark felt a bit uneasy, but he was in an unfamiliar city and didn't want to cause a scene. He figured he'd just deal with it when they arrived, but they didn't arrive. They kept driving, and the scenery started to change from bustling city to quiet, industrial-looking suburbs. Warehouses and empty lots replaced skyscrapers and shops. Mark checked the map on his phone. They were going in the completely opposite direction of the restaurant. He spoke up again, more firmly this time. "Hey, my restaurant is the other way." "You're going the wrong way." The driver didn't even look at him. He just locked the doors and sped up. Mark's unease turned into pure fear. He was being kidnapped. He started shouting, demanding to be let out, but the driver ignored him. Desperate, Mark started looking for a way out. He noticed the driver kept checking his rearview mirror, but not at him. He was looking at the car behind them. A dark SUV had been following them for the last few blocks. This wasn't just a rogue driver. This was something more organized. Mark knew he had one chance. As the taxi slowed to take a sharp turn, he unbuckled his seatbelt, braced himself, and kicked his door as hard as he could. The old lock gave way, and the door flew open. Without a second thought, he threw himself out of the moving car, rolling onto the pavement. He was scraped and bruised, but adrenaline fueled him. He scrambled to his feet and sprinted into a dark alleyway, not stopping until he was sure he wasn't being followed. He eventually found his way to a police station and reported the incident. He never found out what the driver and his accomplices had planned, but he knows he narrowly escaped something terrible. This last story is perhaps the most unsettling of all. It comes from a woman named Jessica, and it didn't happen to her, but to her best friend, Amy. Amy was the kind of person who was always prepared, always cautious. She always shared her live location when she took a rideshare and would text her friends when she was on her way. One Friday night, Amy was heading home from a party. She sent Jessica the usual "on my way home" text, complete with a screenshot of the ride details, the driver's name, photo, and license plate. Everything seemed normal. About 20 minutes later, Jessica got another text from Amy. It was just a string of jumbled letters and numbers. ASDFH9AEO. Jessica texted back, "You okay?" but got no response. She called Amy's phone, It went straight to voicemail. A knot of worry tightened in her stomach. This was not like Amy at all. Jessica checked the live location Amy had shared earlier. The little dot representing Amy's car had stopped, and it hadn't stopped at Amy's apartment. It was stopped on the side of a highway, miles away from her route. Jessica's blood ran cold. She immediately called the police and gave them all the information she had, including the screenshot of the driver's details. The police acted fast. They tracked the car's location and dispatched officers to the scene. What they found was horrifying. The car was there, empty, on the shoulder of the highway. The driver was nowhere to be found, and neither was Amy. An intense search began. The rideshare company and the police worked together, using GPS data and transaction records to piece together the driver's movements. For 2 agonizing days, Jessica and Amy's family waited for news. The story hit the local media, and the driver's face was everywhere. Finally, a tip came in. Someone had recognized the driver from the news report, saying he'd been seen near an abandoned industrial park on the outskirts of the city. Police swarmed the area. They found the driver hiding in a derelict warehouse. And thank God, they found Amy. She was tied up, but she was alive. The driver had planned to hold her for ransom. That last jumbled text, it was Amy trying desperately to type help while her hands were being bound. Her quick thinking and Jessica's immediate action saved her life. These stories are more than just campfire tales. They are real experiences from people who put their trust in a system and found themselves in a nightmare. They highlight the importance of staying vigilant. Always double-check the license plate and the driver's photo before you get in. Share your trip details with a friend or family member. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't be afraid to end the ride, to get out, to make a scene if you have to. Your safety is more important than being polite. While the vast majority of rides are perfectly safe, it's the one that isn't that you need to be prepared for. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching, and if you have a story you'd like to share, leave it in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true scary stories. See you next time. Have you ever gotten into a taxi or rideshare late at night and just felt off? That little voice in the back of your head tells you something isn't right. Most of the time, it's nothing. But for some people, that feeling was a warning sign they should have listened to. Tonight, we're re-diving into some of the most bone-chilling true stories from passengers who thought they were just getting a ride home, but ended up in a real-life nightmare. So buckle up, lock your doors, and make sure you know where you're going. Because after hearing these stories, you might think twice before calling your next ride. Our first story comes from a woman named Chloe, who was heading home after a late shift at a restaurant. It was past midnight, and she was exhausted. She called a rideshare, and a car pulled up a few minutes later. The driver seemed friendly enough at first, making small talk about her job. But then things got weird. He started asking personal questions. Was she single? Did she live alone? Chloe felt a knot tighten in her stomach and gave vague, non-committal answers. She noticed he wasn't following the GPS route. He claimed it was a shortcut, but they were heading into a dark industrial area she didn't recognize. Her heart started pounding. She casually opened her Maps app on her phone, pretending to check messages. They were going in the complete opposite direction of her apartment. She knew she had to get out. Thinking fast, she faked a phone call to a friend, speaking loudly. "Hey, yeah, I'm just a couple of blocks away. I can see your building now. Are you waiting outside?" The driver's friendly demeanor vanished. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his eyes cold. He took a sharp turn and suddenly pulled over. "Get out," he mumbled. Chloe didn't need to be told twice. She scrambled out of the car and ran without looking back. She never reported the driver, too scared of what might happen. She just knew she had narrowly escaped something terrible. This next story is a chilling reminder to always check the license plate and car model before you get in. A college student named Alex was leaving a party on campus. It was dark and raining, and he just wanted to get back to his dorm. His phone buzzed. His ride was arriving. He saw a car that matched the description pull up, so he hopped in the back. But as they drove off, he got another notification. Your driver is arriving now. A cold dread washed over him. He was in the wrong car. He looked at the driver, a man he'd never seen before, who was smiling strangely at him in the mirror. Alex's mind raced. He tried to stay calm and asked the driver to pull over, saying he'd made a mistake. The man just laughed. No mistake. We're going for a little ride. He locked the doors. Alex started to panic, frantically pulling on the handle. The car was speeding up, heading towards the highway. Desperate, Alex saw his chance at a red light. He started screaming and banging on the window, trying to get the attention of the cars around them. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. But then, a driver in the next lane saw him and laid on their horn. The commotion was enough to startle the fake driver. He swore and unlocked the doors, yelling at Alex to get out. Alex bolted from the car and ran straight to a nearby police car he saw at the intersection. The fake rideshare driver sped off and was never caught. Now, imagine you're the driver and your passenger is the one who gives you the creeps. This story comes from a rideshare driver named Ben. He got a pickup request from a remote, wooded area late one night. When he arrived, a man emerged from the trees. He was disheveled and carrying a large, heavy-looking duffel bag. Ben felt uneasy, but figured the guy might have been camping. The man got in, put the bag on the seat next to him, and gave an address in the city. The entire ride was silent. Ben tried to make conversation, but the man just grunted in response. The smell coming from the duffel bag was what really got to Ben. It was a strange, metallic, and slightly sweet odor that made his stomach turn. He tried to ignore it, rolling down the windows and blaming it on a skunk, but the smell persisted. As they got closer to the city, the passengers started getting fidgety, constantly looking out the back window. Ben dropped him off at a nondescript apartment building. The man grabbed his bag and disappeared inside without a word. Ben drove away, unable to shake the weird feeling and the awful smell. The next day, he was cleaning his car when he found a dark, sticky stain on the back seat where the bag had been. He scrubbed it out, trying to forget the whole thing. A week later, he saw a news report. Police had discovered a body in the same woods where he had picked up the mysterious passenger. The description of the suspect was vague, but Ben knew with a sickening certainty who was in his car that night. He never drove for a rideshare service again. Our final story is particularly unsettling because it happened in broad daylight. A young woman named Sarah was traveling in a foreign country and decided to take a taxi from the airport to her hotel. She was excited and a little nervous, this being her first solo trip. She got into a cab at the official taxi stand. The driver was a charismatic older man who spoke good English. He pointed out landmarks and told her stories about the city. Sarah felt at ease, enjoying the impromptu tour. He offered her a bottle of water from a cooler in the front seat, saying it was a hot day. Grateful, she accepted and took a few sips. That's the last thing she clearly remembers. Her next memory is waking up gradually in a dimly lit room she didn't recognize. Her head was pounding and her limbs felt heavy. Panic set in. Her passport, phone, and wallet were all gone. She was alone. She managed to stumble out of the room and found herself in a rundown building in an unfamiliar neighborhood. She eventually found someone who helped her contact the embassy. The authorities believed she had been drugged and robbed by the taxi driver. It was a common scam targeting tourists. She was physically unharmed, but the experience left her terrified and deeply shaken. It's a terrifying reminder that danger doesn't always lurk in the dark. Sometimes it smiles right at you. These stories are a stark warning. While the vast majority of taxi and rideshare experiences are perfectly safe, it's crucial to stay alert. Always share your ride details with a friend or family member. Check the driver's name, photo, and license plate before getting in. And most importantly, trust your gut. If a situation feels wrong, it probably is. Find a safe way out immediately. Your safety is worth more than being polite. Thanks for watching, and remember to stay vigilant out there. If you have a scary rideshare story of your own, share it in the comments below. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Have you ever gotten that weird feeling in the pit of your stomach when you get into a stranger's car? That little voice telling you something isn't right? Most of the time, we just brush it off. But for some people, that gut feeling was a warning they should have listened to. Today, we're diving into some of the most bone-chilling true horror stories from taxi and rideshare experiences. These aren't just spooky tales. They really happened. So buckle up, because this is going to be a bumpy ride. Let's start with a story from a woman named Chloe. She was heading home late one night after a work event. It was raining, and she was exhausted, so she ordered a rideshare. A car pulled up, the driver confirmed her name, and she hopped in. At first, everything seemed normal. The driver was quiet, and Chloe was just scrolling on her phone. But then she noticed they weren't following the GPS route. She politely pointed it out, and the driver just mumbled something about knowing a shortcut. Chloe's unease grew. He kept taking strange, deserted back roads. The city lights faded into darkness. She asked again where they were going, her voice trembling slightly. This time, the driver didn't answer at all. He just locked the doors. Panic set in. Chloe started frantically texting her friend her location, pretending she was on a call. She described the car, the driver, everything she could. Seeing her on the phone, the driver suddenly got angry, yelling at her to hang up. He accelerated, driving more erratically. Chloe knew she had to get out. At a red light, she didn't hesitate. She fumbled with a lock, threw the door open, and bolted out of the car into the pouring rain. She ran without looking back until she found a well-lit gas station and called the police. They later found out the driver had a criminal record. Chloe was lucky she acted on her instincts. It's a terrifying reminder to always trust your gut. Our next story comes from a college student named Mark. He was leaving a friend's party around 2 a.m. and called for a ride. The driver who picked him up was overly friendly, almost too friendly. He kept asking Mark really personal questions: where he lived, if he lived alone, what his class schedule was like. Mark, trying to be polite, gave vague answers. But the driver was persistent. He started complimenting Mark's appearance in a way that made him deeply uncomfortable. Then things took a darker turn. The driver mentioned that he often waited for his favorite passengers near their homes, just to see if they were okay. He said it with a smile, but his eyes were cold. Mark's blood ran cold. He realized this wasn't just a friendly driver. This was someone who was stalking his passengers. Mark discreetly opened his Maps app and saw they had passed his turn several blocks ago. He told the driver he'd made a mistake and that his actual drop-off was right here on a busy, well-lit street corner. The driver looked disappointed but pulled over. Mark practically jumped out of the car and ran into a nearby 24-hour convenience store. He stayed there until he saw the driver finally leave. He reported the driver immediately, and his account was deactivated. Mark never found out what the driver's full intentions were, but he shudders to think what might have happened if he'd let the driver take him all the way home. This one is particularly eerie. A group of 4 friends were in a new city for a music festival. After the show, they hailed a large van-style taxi to take them back to their hotel. The driver was an older man who seemed perfectly normal. They piled in, chatting excitedly about the concert. About halfway through the ride, one of the friends, Sarah, noticed something strange. The driver kept glancing at them in the rearview mirror, but he wasn't looking at their faces. He was looking at their feet. She thought it was odd, but dismissed it. Then her friend whispered to her, "Is it just me? Or does it smell weird in here?" Sarah took a sniff. There was a strange, sweet chemical smell in the air. It was faint, but definitely there. Suddenly, they all started to feel incredibly drowsy. Their conversation slowed and their heads felt heavy. Sarah, who was the most alert, realized with a jolt of terror what might be happening. She remembered reading stories about chemicals being pumped through car vents to knock out passengers. She immediately started shaking her friends awake, yelling, "We need to get out, now." Their sluggishness turned to panic. They started banging on the windows and screaming. The driver, realizing they were onto him, slammed on the brakes in the middle of a bridge. He unlocked the doors and yelled at them to get out. They scrambled out of the van, disoriented and terrified, as the driver sped off into the night. They never got his license plate and he was never caught. What was his plan? They were lucky they woke up in time to find out. Now, let's talk about Liam's experience. He was a frequent business traveler and used ride shares all the time. One evening, after landing in a city he'd never been to, he ordered a car to his hotel. The driver arrived and everything seemed standard. But as they drove, the driver started talking. He didn't ask questions, he just told Liam things. He said, "You work in finance, right? Must be stressful." Liam, surprised, confirmed he did. Then the driver said, "You must miss your wife, Emily, and your 2 kids back home." Liam froze. He had never met this man in his life. How could he possibly know his wife's name? He checked the app again. The driver's profile was blank, no photo, just a name. Liam's mind raced. He asked the driver how he knew all this. The driver just chuckled and said, "The internet is a powerful tool. It's easy to find things out if you know where to look." He then proceeded to list Liam's home address, the names of his children's schools, and even the name of their family dog. This wasn't a ride, it was a threat. Liam was terrified but tried to stay calm. He told the driver he had an urgent call and faked a conversation with a colleague, loudly stating the hotel he was going to and that he would be there in 5 minutes. He hoped anyone, might be listening. When they finally pulled up to the hotel, Liam threw cash at the driver and ran inside without looking back. He immediately contacted the rideshare company and the police. It turned out the driver was using a hacked account and was a known cyberstalker. Liam's story is a chilling reminder of how much of our personal information is out there and how it can be used against us in the most terrifying ways. Our final story is perhaps the most straightforwardly horrifying. It comes from a nurse named Jessica who finished her night shift at the hospital and called for a ride. A car pulled up and she confirmed the make, model, and license plate before getting in. The driver was a young man who seemed agitated. He was tapping his fingers on the steering wheel and constantly checking his mirrors. Jessica tried to make small talk, but he gave short, clipped answers. As they got onto the highway, a police car appeared behind them with its lights flashing. The driver didn't pull over. Instead, he floored it. A high-speed chase began. Jessica was screaming, begging him to stop. He just yelled at her to be quiet. Cars were swerving to get out of their way. It was absolute chaos. Jessica was convinced she was going to die. She was trapped in a real-life action movie she never asked to be in. The chase ended when the driver crashed into a barrier. The airbags deployed and the car was filled with smoke. Jessica, though bruised and shaken, was able to unbuckle herself and crawl out of the wreckage. Police officers with guns drawn surrounded the car and arrested the driver. She later found out that the driver had just committed a robbery and was trying to make his getaway when he accepted her ride request. He was using her as an unknowing hostage and cover. Jessica was physically okay, but the trauma of that night stayed with her for a very long time. These stories are terrifying, not just because they're scary, but because they could happen to anyone. It shows how vulnerable we are when we place our trust in a stranger. Always share your ride details with a friend. Check the driver and car information. And if something feels off, don't get in the car. Trust that little voice in your head. It might just save your life. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video. Have you ever gotten into a taxi or a rideshare and just felt off? That gut feeling that something isn't right? Most of the time, it's nothing. But for some people, that feeling was a warning sign they should have listened to. Tonight, we're diving into some of the most chilling, terrifying, and true horror stories that happened in the backseat of a stranger's car. These stories will make you think twice before you book your next ride. So buckle up, lock your doors, and let's get into it. Our first story comes from a Reddit user named Chloe. It was a cold Friday night, and after a long week at work, all she wanted was to get home to her apartment. Her usual bus wasn't running, so she decided to call a rideshare. A car pulled up a few minutes later, and everything seemed normal at first. The driver was a man in his late 40s, maybe early 50s. He was polite, asked her how her day was, the usual small talk. But as they started driving, Chloe noticed they were going the wrong way. She pointed it out, saying her apartment was in the opposite direction. The driver just smiled and said, "I know a shortcut. It's faster, trust me." That's when the first alarm bell went off in her head. She checked the map on her phone. They were definitely not on a shortcut. They were heading towards an industrial area on the outskirts of town, an area known for being deserted at night. Chloe's heart started to pound. She tried to stay calm and asked again, "Sir, I really think this is the wrong way. Could you please turn around?" This time, the driver's friendly demeanor vanished. He turned to her, his eyes cold, and said, "We're almost there. Just relax." That's when she noticed the child locks were on. She couldn't open the door. Panic set in. She thought about her options. The car was moving fast, so jumping out wasn't one of them. She discreetly started texting her boyfriend, sharing her live location and telling him she was in trouble. As the car slowed down to turn into a dark, empty warehouse district, Chloe knew she had to act. She saw the driver reach for something in the glove compartment. Without thinking, she grabbed her heavy metal water bottle from her bag and swung it as hard as she could, hitting him in the side of the head. The driver yelped in pain and slammed on the brakes. For a split second, the car was unlocked. Chloe didn't hesitate. She threw the door open and sprinted out into the darkness, not looking back. She ran for what felt like miles, her lungs burning, until she saw the flashing lights of a police car her boyfriend had called. They never caught the driver. The rideshare company had no record of the trip, suggesting he was using a fake or stolen account. Chloe was safe, but the memory of that night, the cold look in that man's eyes, still haunts her. This next story is even more unsettling because it involves a group of friends who thought they were safe together. It happened to a guy named Mark and his two friends, Sarah and Ben, after a concert. It was past midnight and they were all tired and a little tipsy. They called a rideshare and a large van pulled up, which was perfect for the three of them. The driver seemed friendly enough, chatting with them about the concert. They gave him the address to Ben's house, where they were all crashing for the night. The drive started normally, but then, just like in Chloe's story, they noticed they were going in a strange direction. Ben, who knew the area well, told the driver he was taking a long, weird route. The driver just laughed it off, saying the GPS was rerouting due to traffic, but at 2 a.m, there was no traffic. The atmosphere in the van shifted. The friendly chatter stopped. The driver was silent, his eyes fixed on the road. Mark looked back and saw another car, a dark sedan, had been following them for the last 10 minutes. Every turn they made, the sedan followed. He pointed it out to his friends, and they all started to feel a deep sense of dread. They were being led somewhere, and they weren't alone. Ben tried to open his door, but again, the child locks were engaged. They were trapped. Sarah started to panic, but Mark tried to keep everyone calm. He told them to get their phones ready, to be prepared to call for help the second they had a chance. The driver overheard them and suddenly slammed on the brakes in the middle of a deserted, unlit road. The van stopped, and the sedan that was following them pulled up right behind, boxing them in. The driver turned around, a chilling grin on his face, and said, "Looks like we're here." The doors of the sedan opened, and two large, intimidating men got out and started walking towards the van. It was a setup, an ambush. Mark, Ben, and Sarah were terrified, thinking this was the end. But Ben, an avid rock climber, remembered he had a small, powerful multi-tool in his pocket. While the driver was distracted by the men outside, Ben quickly used the window breaker on the tool to shatter the side window. The loud crash startled everyone. Without a second's hesitation, all three of them scrambled out through the broken window, cutting themselves on the glass, and ran for their lives into the nearby woods. They could hear the men shouting and chasing after them, but they just kept running, fueled by adrenaline. They eventually made it to a main road and flagged down a passing car. They reported the incident, but like before, the driver and the vehicle seemed to vanish into thin air. They were lucky to escape, but it serves as a terrifying reminder that even in a group, you're not always safe. Our final story for tonight comes from the perspective of a driver, and it's a stark reminder that danger on the road can go both ways. This happened to a taxi driver named Frank, a veteran who had been driving his cab for over 20 years. He thought he had seen it all. One rainy evening, he picked up a young woman from a downtown bar. She looked distressed and was crying. She told Frank that she had just had a huge fight with her boyfriend and needed to get away. She gave him an address across town and spent most of the ride sobbing quietly in the back. Frank felt bad for her and tried to offer some comforting words. He was just a few blocks from her destination when she suddenly shouted, "Stop here, pull over now." Confused, Frank pulled over to the side of the road. The woman jumped out of the cab and ran towards a man who was walking down the sidewalk. Frank assumed this was the boyfriend she had been fighting with. He watched as she started yelling at the man, who looked completely bewildered. Then, to Frank's horror, the woman pulled a knife from her purse and started lunging at the man. Frank immediately hit the emergency button in his cab, which alerted his dispatch and the police. The man on the street was trying to defend himself, backing away from the woman who was swinging the knife wildly. Frank wanted to help, but he knew getting out of the car would only put him in danger. He laid on his horn, trying to attract attention from nearby houses. Suddenly, the woman turned her attention from the man and ran back towards the taxi. Frank's blood ran cold. She wrenched open the front passenger door, which he had forgotten to lock in the chaos, and tried to climb in, still holding the knife. "Drive!" She screamed at him, her eyes wild. "Drive now, or I'll kill you." Frank, reacting on pure instinct, slammed his foot on the gas. The sudden acceleration threw the woman off balance, and she fell out of the moving car and onto the street. Frank didn't stop driving. He sped down the road until he saw the flashing lights of the approaching police cars. He pulled over, shaking, and told them what happened. The police found the woman and the man she had attacked, who, it turned out, was a complete stranger. She was having a severe psychotic episode. Frank was unharmed, but he said he'd never forget the look in her eyes. It was a terrifying reminder that the passenger in your back seat can sometimes be the real monster. These stories are a chilling look into the dark side of what can happen when you put your trust in a stranger. While the vast majority of taxi and rideshare trips are perfectly safe, it's always important to stay vigilant. Trust your gut. If a situation feels wrong, it probably is. Always check the license plate and driver's photo before getting in. Share your ride details with a friend or family member. And know your escape routes. Thank you for watching. Stay safe out there, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true horror stories. Have you ever gotten into a rideshare and felt that something was off? That little voice in your head telling you to pay attention? Tonight, we're diving into 3 chilling, true stories from people who listened to that voice and from some who wish they had. These aren't campfire tales. They're real experiences that will make you think twice the next time you order a car. So, buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Our first story comes from a woman named Chloe, who was heading home late one night after a work event. She booked a rideshare, and a car pulled up a few minutes later. The driver was a man who seemed friendly enough at first, but the vibe in the car was strange. The doors locked with a heavy clunk, and he started asking questions that were a little too personal. Where exactly she lived, if she lived alone, what her work schedule was like. Chloe tried to keep her answers vague, her heart starting to beat a little faster. Then he missed the turn for her neighborhood. When she pointed it out, he just smiled and said, "I know a shortcut," but they weren't going toward her home at all. They were heading into a dark industrial area with abandoned warehouses. Panic set in. Chloe clutched her phone, ready to dial for help. She noticed the child safety locks were on, so she couldn't open the back doors. He kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, his friendly mask completely gone, replaced by a cold, predatory stare. Chloe remembered a safety tip she'd read online. She pretended to get a call from her friend and spoke loudly, "Hey, yeah, I'm almost there. The driver is taking a weird route, but I'm sharing my location with you. The car is a blue sedan. License plate number is Golf Foxtrot Victor 2 -4 -9. Yeah, I can see you standing outside my building now. I'll be there in 2 minutes." The driver's face changed instantly. He slammed on the brakes, his friendly act returning as he apologized, claiming he was new to the area and got confused. He quickly turned the car around and drove her straight home, the rest of the ride in dead silence. Chloe practically threw herself out of the car the moment it stopped. She never reported him, too scared of what might happen, but she never forgot the look in his eyes. Our next story is even more unsettling. It comes from a college student named Ben, who is visiting a friend in a different city. He used a popular rideshare app to get from the train station to his friend's apartment. The driver was a quiet, older man who didn't say much. The ride was normal at first, just city lights passing by the window, but then Ben noticed they were going in circles. He checked the map on his own phone, and they were definitely not on the right path. He politely mentioned it to the driver, who just grunted and said the GPS was recalculating. After the third loop around the same block, Ben's unease turned into real fear. He asked the driver to please just pull over and let him out. The driver ignored him. He just kept driving, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Ben tried the door handle, but it was locked. He yelled, "Let me out of the car now." The driver just turned up the radio, blasting static to drown him out. Ben's mind was racing. He was in an unfamiliar city, trapped in a car with a silent, menacing stranger. Desperate, Ben did the only thing he could think of. He faked being sick. He started making loud gagging noises, leaning forward and clutching his stomach. He yelled, "I'm going to be sick. All over your car. Pull over." That finally got a reaction. The driver, clearly not wanting to clean up a mess, screeched to a halt. The second the car stopped, the locks clicked open. Ben scrambled out, not even bothering to grab his backpack from the trunk. He just ran. He ran until he saw a well-lit convenience store and ducked inside, shaking. He called his friend, who came to pick him up. They went back later to file a police report, but the driver was long gone. The rideshare company suspended the driver's account, but Ben was left with a lingering fear of ever getting into a stranger's car again. This last story is a warning about how things can go wrong, even when you think you're being careful. It happened to a group of 3 friends, Sarah, Emily, and Jess, on a night out. They called for a large SUV to take them home. When a car matching the description pulled up, the driver called out Sarah's name. They all piled in, chatting and laughing about their night. The driver was friendly, joining in on their conversation. They felt completely at ease. It wasn't until they were about 15 minutes into the ride that Sarah checked her phone. The app showed their actual driver was still 5 minutes away in a different car. A cold dread washed over them. This wasn't their ride. The friendly man driving them was a complete stranger who had somehow gotten her name. Sarah subtly texted her friends who were sitting beside her. "This is the wrong car." The atmosphere in the SUV instantly changed. The girls fell silent. The driver seemed to notice. "Everything all right back there?" he asked, his voice no longer sounding so friendly. They were on a highway far from their destination, and the man was now driving faster, taking an exit into a dark, wooded area. Jess, thinking fast, told the driver that Emily was feeling carsick and needed fresh air. She begged him to pull over for just a second. To their surprise, he actually slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder of the desolate road. The moment the car stopped, all 3 of them threw their doors open and bolted into the woods. They didn't look back. They just ran, stumbling over roots and branches in the dark, adrenaline pumping through their veins. They could hear the car's engine revving behind them before it sped off. They eventually found their way to a house with its lights on and banged on the door, where a kind family let them in and called the police. They learned later that this was a known tactic used by predators. They hang around popular pickup spots, wait for someone to call a ride, and then pretend to be that driver. These stories are terrifying because they're real. They remind us that while ride-sharing is convenient, we have to stay vigilant. Always double-check the license plate, the car model, and the driver's photo before you get in. Share your trip status with a friend. And most importantly, always trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't be afraid to cancel a ride, get out of the car, or call for help. Your safety is more important than being polite. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories. See you next time.